Standing at the altar, in my perfectly pressed tuxedo, I watched 300 guests whisper among themselves as the minutes ticked by. Rachel was supposed to walk down that aisle 20 minutes ago. My hands were sweating despite the air conditioning. At Sunset Hills Country Club, and Tom, my best man, kept checking his phone with increasing worry. The wedding planner, Linda Chen, had already made 3 trips to the bridal suite, each time returning with a strained smile that told me everything I needed to know. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. When the text message finally came, it wasn't from Rachel. It was from her sister Sophia, and the words hit me like a freight train. "Jake, I'm so sorry. Rachel left with Brandon Cole. She said she can't go through with it. She's in love with someone else. 3 years of planning, $50,000. Of my family's savings poured into this day, a honeymoon to Italy already paid for, and she just left with Brandon Cole, the tech mogul who'd been circling her real estate agency like a vulture for months, throwing money around and making promises about expanding her career. I should have seen it coming when she started working late every night, when her phone became permanently glued to her hand, when she stopped looking me in the eye during conversations. The humiliation burned through me as I stood there, realizing I had to face all these people who'd traveled from across the country to celebrate what they thought was going to be the happiest day of my life. My parents had flown in from Portland. Rachel's entire extended family had driven up from Los Angeles. My childhood friends had taken vacation days. And now I had to tell them all that the bride had decided our love story wasn't worth finishing. But what happened next changed everything. As I finally worked up the courage to approach the microphone to address our guests, something impossible occurred. The world seemed to shimmer around me, like heat waves rising from summer asphalt. Then suddenly, I was standing in my apartment. 3 months earlier, holding the phone as Rachel excitedly told me about her promotion at Prestige Real Estate. The same conversation I remembered having before, but now I was experiencing it again with crystal clarity about what was coming next. I knew every word she was about to say. I knew she'd mentioned meeting some investors, including someone named Brandon, who was really interested in the commercial properties downtown. I knew she'd brush off my concerns about working late, insisting it was just temporary until she established herself in her new position. And I knew that in exactly 97 days, she'd abandoned me at the altar to run away with that same Brandon. Somehow impossibly, I'd been given a second chance. But this time, I wasn't going to be the heartbroken fool left standing alone in front of 300 people. The first thing I did was call Sophia. Rachel's younger sister had always been the complete opposite of her sibling. Where Rachel was ambitious and calculating, Sophia was warm and genuine. Where Rachel craved the spotlight and expensive things, Sophia found joy in simple moments and helping others. She taught second grade at Riverside Elementary and volunteered at the animal shelter on weekends. During our 3-year engagement, Sophia had been my quiet ally, the one person in Rachel's family who seemed to understand me. "Jake," Sophia answered on the second ring, sounding surprised. We rarely talked directly since Rachel had made it clear she didn't appreciate her fiancé and sister being too close. "Is everything okay?" "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me," I said, my heart pounding as I tested the waters of this impossible situation. "Do you think Rachel really wants to marry me?" The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. When Sophia finally spoke, her voice was carefully measured. "Why are you asking me that, Jake?" "Because I'm starting to think she's having doubts, and I'd rather know now than find out the hard way later." It wasn't exactly the truth, but it was close enough. "You know your sister better than anyone. Has she said anything to you about having second thoughts?" Another pause. Then Sophia sighed deeply. "Jake, I love my sister, but I've been worried about this for months. She's been different lately, distracted, and she keeps talking about this investor guy at work like he's some kind of savior who's going to transform her entire career. When I ask her about wedding plans, she changes the subject." My blood ran cold, even though I already knew what was coming. Hearing it confirmed by someone else made it feel more real, more devastating. Has she mentioned his name, this investor? Brandon something. Cole, I think... Jake, what's really going on here? I took a deep breath and made a decision that would change everything. Sophia, I think Rachel is having an affair.
Ow.
And I think she's planning to leave me. I don't have proof yet, but I need someone I can trust to help me figure out what's really happening before I make any permanent decisions about our future. The conversation that followed was the most honest one I'd had with anyone in months. Sophia admitted she'd been concerned about Rachel's behavior, but hadn't known how to bring it up without seeming disloyal to her sister. She'd noticed the secretive phone calls, the sudden interest in expensive clothes and jewelry that were way beyond what Rachel could afford on her real estate salary. And the way Rachel would glow whenever she talked about work but seemed almost irritated when discussing wedding details. I don't want to see you get hurt, Jake, Sophia said finally. You're a good man, and you deserve someone who's excited to marry you. It's not someone who treats your engagement like a backup plan. That's when I knew Sophia was going to be crucial to my strategy. In my previous timeline, she'd been the messenger who delivered the devastating news. This time, she was going to be my ally in uncovering the truth and making sure justice was served. Over the next few weeks, I played my part perfectly, continued planning the wedding, making payments to vendors, and acting like the devoted fiancé while secretly preparing for what I knew was coming. But I also began documenting everything. I hired a private investigator to follow Rachel and Brandon, gathering photographic evidence of their affair. I quietly restructured my finances, moving money into accounts that Rachel couldn't access. Most importantly, I started spending more time with Sophia, ostensibly to get her help with wedding preparations, but really to build the foundation for what I was planning. Sophia was everything Rachel wasn't. She listened when I talked about my dreams of expanding Thompson Auto Repair into a full-service automotive center. She laughed at my terrible jokes and shared stories about her students that revealed her incredible patience and kindness. When we worked together on wedding favors or centerpieces, I found myself genuinely enjoying her company in a way I hadn't experienced with Rachel in months. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Rachel was falling for a man who saw her as a trophy to be acquired, I was discovering that her sister possessed all the qualities I'd originally thought I loved about Rachel. Sophia's beauty was quieter, but more genuine. Her intelligence was practical rather than cunning. And most importantly, when she looked at me, I felt like she actually saw me as a person worth knowing, not just a stepping stone to somewhere else. 2 months before the wedding, the private investigator delivered a folder full of photographs that confirmed everything I already knew. Rachel and Brandon holding hands at expensive restaurants. Rachel wearing jewelry I'd never seen before. Rachel kissing him in the parking lot of her office building. The evidence was overwhelming, but instead of confronting her immediately, I did something else entirely. I asked Sophia to have dinner with me to discuss the final wedding preparations. We met at a small Italian restaurant downtown, away from anywhere Rachel might see us. After we'd ordered, I slid the folder across the table. I'm sorry you have to see this, I said as Sophia opened it and her face went pale. But I needed someone in your family to know the truth about what's been happening. Sophia stared at the photographs for a long time, her hands trembling slightly. When she finally looked up, her eyes were filled with tears of anger and disappointment. How long have you known? I've suspected for weeks, but I only got confirmation yesterday. Sophia, I'm going to call off the wedding, but I need your help with something first. Rachel doesn't get to walk away from this without consequences. She's spent my family's money, wasted months of planning, and worst of all, she's been lying to all of us while carrying on with another man. I want her to face the reality of her choices in front of everyone who was supposed to celebrate our marriage. What I proposed next was audacious, risky, and absolutely perfect. Instead of quietly canceling the wedding and letting Rachel slip away to her new life with Brandon, I was going to let her abandon me at the altar exactly as she'd planned. But this time, I'd be ready for it. And this time, the story wouldn't end with my humiliation. This time, it would end with the most spectacular act of poetic justice anyone at Sunset Hills Country Club had ever witnessed. Sophia's reaction to my proposal was exactly what I'd hoped for. After the initial shock wore off, a spark of determination flickered in her dark eyes. She wasn't just angry at Rachel for betraying me. She was furious about the embarrassment her sister was about to bring on their entire family. The Martinez name meant something in Riverside. Their parents had built a respected landscaping business from nothing. And Rachel's selfish actions would humiliate everyone who shared her blood. "You're absolutely certain she's going to go through with abandoning you?" Sophia asked, studying the photographs again with a mixture of disgust and disbelief. I know it sounds impossible to predict, but yes, she's already made her choice. "Sophia, the wedding is just an inconvenience she's planning to escape from at the last possible moment." I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. But what if we turned her moment of triumph into her worst nightmare? The plan I outlined was brilliant in its simplicity. Rachel expected to humiliate me in front of our friends and family, and ride off into the sunset with Brandon while I was left to clean up the mess. Instead, I would orchestrate events so that her abandonment became the catalyst for something she'd never see coming. When she left me at the altar, I wouldn't stand there broken and defeated. I'd have Sophia waiting in the wings, ready to step into her sister's place. "You want me to marry you?" Sophia's voice was barely above a whisper, her cheeks flushing. "Pink Jake? That's insane! People don't just substitute one bride for another like they're changing dinner reservations." "Why not?" I challenged. "All the guests will already be there. The minister, the flowers, the reception dinner, the band, everything will be paid for and ready. Rachel wants to throw it all away for Brandon Cole? Fine, but she doesn't get to destroy the day for everyone else who made the effort to be there. You and I can give them the wedding celebration they came for, and Rachel can live with the consequences of her choices." The beauty of the plan extended far beyond simple revenge. I genuinely cared about Sophia more than I'd ever admitted to. Myself, while I was engaged to her sister, during the months I'd been planning my wedding to Rachel, I'd found myself looking forward to conversations with Sophia more than with my actual fiancée. She had this way of listening that made me feel understood, and her laugh was infectious in a way that Rachel's calculated smile had never been. "But what about love, Jake?" Sophia asked, her voice vulnerable. "Marriage should be about love, not revenge." I reached across the table and took her hand, surprised by how right it felt. "Sophia, I need to be honest with you about something. These past few weeks, getting to know you better while we've been working on wedding preparations, I've realized something I should have figured out a long time ago. You're everything I thought I was getting with Rachel, but real." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. You're kind without expecting anything in return. You're smart without being manipulative. And when you smile, it's because you're actually happy, not because you're working an angle. Ah. Her eyes widened, and I could see her processing the implications of what I was saying. "Jake, you can't possibly know how you feel about me when you're still engaged to my sister. Your emotions are all mixed up because of what Rachel's doing to you." "Maybe," I admitted. "But I know that every time Rachel canceled our dinner plans to work late, I was secretly relieved. And I know that the highlight of my week has become whatever excuse I could find to spend time with you. That has to mean something." Sophia pulled her hand away, but gently. "This is all happening too fast. Even if Rachel does what you think she's going to do, even if she really abandons you, I can't just step in and marry you on the same day. People would think I was taking advantage of the situation. Let them think whatever they want," I said firmly. "The people whose opinions matter will understand that life is unpredictable, and sometimes the best thing you can do is grab happiness when it presents itself. Besides, Sophia, think about what this means for you too. You're 28 years old, working a job you love, but barely making ends meet. Living in that tiny apartment while Rachel flaunts the expensive lifestyle her affair has bought her. Don't you deserve a chance at something better?" The conversation continued for 2 hours, with Sophia raising every logical objection and me countering each, one with a combination of practical reasoning and heartfelt emotion. By the time we left the restaurant, she hadn't agreed to my plan, but she hadn't said no either. More importantly, she'd agreed to keep meeting with me under the pretense of wedding planning while we both figured out what we really wanted. Over. The following weeks, our fake collaboration became increasingly real. Sophia would come to my auto shop after school to help me organize RSVPs and finalize seating charts. But we'd end up talking for hours about everything except the wedding. She told me about her dreams of opening a tutoring center for underprivileged kids. I shared my vision of turning Thompson Auto Repair into a destination for classic car restoration. We discovered a shared love of old movies and started having planning sessions that were really just excuses to watch Casablanca or The Princess Bride in my apartment. The physical attraction was undeniable, but I was careful not to push things too far. Sophia was still struggling with the ethics of what we were discussing, and I knew that any romantic pressure would send her running. Instead, I focused on showing her through my actions that I valued her mind, her opinions, and her company. When she mentioned wanting to redecorate her classroom but not having the budget, I showed up the next weekend with paint and supplies. When her car started making strange noises, I fixed it without being asked and refused to accept payment. Meanwhile, Rachel remained completely oblivious to what was developing right under her nose. She was so consumed with her secret affair and her plans to escape our relationship that she barely noticed how much time Sophia and I were spending together. When she did comment, it was usually something dismissive, like, "I'm so glad you two are handling the boring details so I can focus on the important stuff at work." The important stuff at work, of course, was Brandon Cole. My private investigator continued documenting their relationship, and the evidence became more damning. By the week, hotel receipts, jewelry purchases, romantic getaways disguised as business trips. Brandon was clearly preparing to whisk Rachel away from her ordinary life in Riverside to something more glamorous, and Rachel was eager to be rescued. Now, 3 weeks before the wedding, Sophia finally gave me her answer. We were sitting in my apartment. After watching The Notebook, and she'd been unusually quiet all evening. When the credits rolled, she turned to me with tears in her eyes. "Jake, I need to tell you something, and I need you to promise you'll be honest with me in return." "Anything," I said, my heart racing. "I've been in love with you since the day Rachel brought you home to meet our parents," she whispered. "No, that's terrible. I know it makes me a horrible sister. But watching her treat you like you were just another accessory in her perfect life has been torture. You deserve so much better than someone who sees you as convenient rather than cherished." The relief that flooded through me was overwhelming. "Sophia, you're not a horrible sister. You're the most loyal, caring person I know." Rachel made her choice when she decided Brandon Cole was more important than the man who wanted to build a life with her. If she's determined to throw away something, good. Why shouldn't that good thing go to someone who will appreciate it? "Because it still feels like I'm stealing my sister's fiancé," Sophia said, but her resolve was clearly weakening. "You're not stealing anything," I insisted, taking her hands in mine. "Rachel is giving me away. She's literally planning to abandon me in front of 300 people so she can run off with another man. At that point, I'll be free to choose who I want to be with. And Sophia, I want to choose you. Not as revenge against Rachel, not as a consolation prize, but because you're the woman I should have been with all along." That night, Sophia agreed to my plan. But we both understood that we were taking an enormous risk. If Rachel somehow changed her mind and didn't abandon the wedding, our backup plan would be exposed and both of our reputations would be destroyed. If Rachel did go through with her escape, but Sophia lost her nerve at the crucial moment, I'd be left looking even more foolish than if I'd just quietly canceled the wedding. But the potential reward was worth the risk. Instead of being the pathetic man whose fiancé left him for someone richer, I'd be the romantic hero who found true love. In the aftermath of betrayal, instead of wasting $50,000 on a wedding that never happened, every penny would go toward celebrating the beginning of something genuine and beautiful. Most importantly, Rachel would have to live with the knowledge that her selfish decision had actually freed me to find happiness with someone infinitely better than her. The sister she'd always dismissed as naive and boring would become Mrs. Jake Thompson, while Rachel was left to navigate the uncertain waters of being Brandon Cole's mistress. The final 2 weeks before the wedding were a carefully choreographed performance. Rachel continued planning her escape, completely unaware that I knew every detail of her strategy. Sophia continued helping with wedding preparations while secretly preparing for her role as the replacement bride, and I continued playing the part of the devoted but clueless fiancé. all while making sure every element was in place for the most spectacular reversal of fortune Riverside had ever witnessed. The morning of the wedding arrived with perfect California sunshine streaming through the windows of Sunset Hills Country Club. I stood in the groom's suite, adjusting my bow tie for the third time, while Tom paced nervously behind me. My best man had no idea what was about to unfold, but he could sense something was different about my demeanor. Most grooms were either excited or terrified on their wedding day. I was calm, focused, and quietly anticipating the performance of a lifetime. "You seem unusually relaxed for someone about to promise his life to another person," Tom observed, loosening his own tie. "Either you've found some kind of Zen state, or you're in complete denial about what marriage actually means." I smiled at my reflection in the mirror. Maybe. I've just finally figured out what I really want. What I really wanted was about to unfold exactly as I'd orchestrated it. Rachel was in the bridal suite 3 doors down, going through the motions of preparing for a wedding she had no intention of completing. According to the text updates Sophia had been sending me, Rachel seemed increasingly agitated as the morning progressed. She'd snapped at the makeup artist twice, rejected the first hairstyle attempt, and kept checking her phone every few minutes. Sophia, meanwhile, was playing her role perfectly. She was officially the maid of honor, helping Rachel get ready, while secretly wearing the backup wedding dress we'd hidden in her car. The dress had been Sophia's idea, actually. She'd realized that if we were going to pull off this substitution, she needed something to wear that would be appropriate for a spontaneous wedding ceremony. We'd found a simple but elegant white dress at a boutique in the next town over, and Sophia had been keeping it at her apartment for 2 weeks. At 11:30, exactly 90 minutes before the ceremony was supposed to begin, my phone buzzed with the message I'd been expecting. It was from Brandon Cole, though he didn't know. I was the recipient. The message was meant for Rachel, but thanks to some creative work with her phone settings during one of our wedding planning sessions, I was receiving copies of all her text communications. "Cars waiting in the back parking lot. Driver knows to take us straight to the airport. Flight leaves at 2 p.m. Hope you're ready for paradise. Beautiful." Paradise. Brandon was whisking Rachel away to some exotic location where they could start their new life together while I was left to explain to 300 guests why there wouldn't be a wedding after all. At least that's what Rachel thought was going to happen. I forwarded the message to Sophia with a simple note: "It's showtime." The next hour unfolded like a carefully scripted drama. Rachel went through all the motions of getting ready, allowing the photographer to capture what she probably thought would be the last pictures of her old life. She posed with her bridesmaids, hugged her parents, and even had a few fake tears. When her mother gave her the family necklace that had been worn by Martina's brides for 3 generations, Sophia played her part beautifully, expressing all the appropriate excitement and emotion, while secretly knowing that she would be the one actually wearing that necklace before the day was over. The other bridesmaids noticed nothing unusual, though. Sophia later told me that Rachel's behavior was so erratic that everyone in the bridal suite was walking on eggshells. At 12:45, 15 minutes before the ceremony was scheduled to begin, Rachel made her move.
Ow.
She claimed she needed a moment alone to collect herself before walking down the aisle. The bridesmaids and her mother filed out of the suite, leaving Rachel by herself for what everyone assumed would be a few minutes of quiet reflection. Instead, Rachel changed out of her wedding dress and into the travel outfit she'd hidden in her garment bag. She left the wedding dress hanging on its hook, along with a letter that Sophia found 5 minutes later when she returned to check on her sister. The letter was everything I'd expected it would be. Rachel explained that she'd fallen in love with someone else and couldn't go through with marrying me. She claimed she'd tried to find the courage to call off the wedding weeks ago, but hadn't been able to face the disappointment and embarrassment. She apologized for the timing, but insisted that it would be worse to marry me when her heart belonged to another man. She asked Sophia to break the news gently and to tell everyone how sorry she was. What Rachel didn't include in her letter was any acknowledgement of the financial devastation she was leaving behind, the humiliation she was inflicting on both families, or the 300 guests who had traveled from around the country to celebrate what they thought was going to be a joyous occasion. Her apology was shallow and self-serving, focused entirely on making herself feel better about her betrayal rather than taking responsibility for the chaos she was creating. Sophia called me immediately after finding the letter, her voice shaking with a mixture of anger and excitement. "She's really gone, Jake. She actually did it. Are you ready?" I asked, my heart pounding with anticipation. "I'm terrified, but yes, let's do this." The next 20 minutes were a whirlwind of activity. Sophia quickly changed into the backup wedding dress, which fit her perfectly despite being a size smaller than Rachel. The simple design was actually more flattering on Sophia's petite frame than Rachel's elaborate gown would have been. While Sophia transformed herself from maid of honor to bride, I made a series of phone calls to set the rest of my plan in motion. First, I called Linda Chen, the wedding planner, and told her there had been a change of plans. The bride needed a few extra minutes, but the ceremony would proceed as scheduled with a slight modification to the program. Linda was flustered, but professional, agreeing to delay the processional by 10 minutes while she made the necessary adjustments. Next, I called the minister, Reverend Martinez, no relation to Rachel's family, despite the shared surname, explained that there had been an emergency situation, but that I still wanted to proceed with a wedding ceremony, just with a different bride. Reverend Martinez had known both Sophia and Rachel since they were children, and while he was shocked by the circumstances, he agreed to perform the ceremony after I assured him that both Sophia and I were entering into marriage willingly and with full understanding of what we were doing. The most delicate conversation was with Sophia's parents, Maria and Carlos Martinez. I found them in the cocktail area greeting guests and obviously proud of their family's big day. When I pulled them aside and explained what had happened, their reactions were exactly what I'd hoped for. Maria's first response was horror at Rachel's behavior. She left. "She actually left you standing at the altar." "Not quite at the altar," I corrected. "She left before the ceremony started." "But Maria, I need you to know that this isn't the disaster it appears to be. I'm in love with Sophia, and she's agreed to marry me instead. Right now, today, in front of all these people who came here to celebrate love." Carlos was skeptical, at first wondering if this was some kind of rebound reaction to Rachel's abandonment. But when Sophia appeared in her wedding dress, glowing with happiness and determination, both parents could see that this wasn't a desperate attempt to salvage a ruined day. This was two people who had found each other in the aftermath of betrayal and were brave enough to seize their chance at happiness. "Are you absolutely certain about this, Mia?" Maria asked Sophia, taking her daughter's hands and searching her eyes for any sign of doubt. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life, Mama," Sophia replied. "I love Jake, and I believe he loves me too. Rachel made her choice, and now I'm making mine." The transformation of the wedding party was swift and decisive. The bridesmaids, who had been frantically searching for Rachel, were quickly brought up to speed on the new plan. Their reactions ranged from shock to admiration to barely concealed delight that the sweet, overlooked sister was finally getting her moment to shine. Tom, my best man, was initially concerned that I was making an emotional decision I'd regret later. But one look at my face told him that this wasn't about revenge or desperation. This was about love. At exactly 1:15 p.m., just 15 minutes after the originally scheduled start time, the music began and the processional started down the aisle. The guests, who had been murmuring among themselves about the delay, fell silent as the wedding party appeared. When Sophia stepped into view at the back of the aisle, radiant in her simple white dress and carrying a hastily assembled bouquet of flowers from the centerpieces, a collective gasp went up from the crowd. Some guests were confused, wondering if they'd somehow misunderstood which sister was getting married. Others quickly realized what had happened and watched with fascination as the drama unfolded. But most people simply saw a beautiful bride, walking toward a groom who looked at her like she was the answer to every prayer he'd ever whispered. As Sophia walked down the aisle toward me, her eyes locked on mine with absolute certainty. I felt a peace I'd never experienced during the months of planning my wedding to Rachel. This was right. This was real. And this was about to become the most talked about wedding in Riverside history. The ceremony itself was magical in a way that my planned wedding to Rachel never could have been. When Reverend Martinez asked if anyone objected to the union, the silence was profound and supportive. These weren't people going through the motions of a social obligation. They were witnessing something authentic and beautiful rising from the ashes of betrayal. Sophia's voice was steady and clear as she recited her vows, and when I slipped the ring that had been intended for Rachel onto her finger, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. The kiss that sealed our marriage was soft and sweet, full of promise rather than performance. As we turned to face our guests as husband and wife, the applause was thunderous. People were crying, laughing, and shaking their heads in amazement at what they'd just witnessed. Tom clapped me on the back with genuine admiration. "I don't know how you pulled this off, brother, but I've never seen you happier." He was right. Standing there with Sophia's hand in mine, watching 300 people celebrate our courage to choose love over convention, I felt a completeness that had been missing throughout my entire relationship with Rachel. This wasn't about proving a point or getting revenge anymore. This was about two people who had found each other and were brave enough to build something real together. The reception was unlike anything I could have imagined. Instead of the formal, carefully choreographed affair Rachel had planned, it became a genuine celebration of community and resilience. The guests were energized by the unexpected turn of events, and the atmosphere was electric with the kind of joy that can only come from witnessing something truly spontaneous and heartfelt. Sophia's transformation from maid of honor to bride had been so seamless that many guests didn't even realize what had happened until they heard the story from others. But once word spread about Rachel's abandonment and Sophia's last-minute substitution, the reaction was overwhelmingly positive. People kept approaching us throughout the evening to express their admiration for our courage and to share their own stories of love, found in unexpected places. The dance floor was packed all night long. Sophia and I had never rehearsed a first dance, so we simply held each other close and swayed to the music while everyone watched with tears in their eyes. Her dress rustled softly as we moved, and she whispered in my ear, "I can't believe we actually did this." "Do you regret it?" I asked, searching her face for any sign of doubt. "Never," she said firmly. "This is the first day of the rest of our lives, Jake, and I can't wait to see what we build together." The evening took on a life of its own. Sophia's students from Riverside Elementary had made a surprise appearance. Having heard about the wedding through the local grapevine, they presented her with a handmade card signed by her entire second-grade class, congratulating their favorite teacher on her happiness. Sophia cried, reading their innocent messages about love and marriage, and I knew in that moment that these were the kinds of people who would fill our life together, genuine, caring individuals who valued authenticity over appearance. Meanwhile, the elephant in the room was Rachel's absence. But rather than casting a shadow over the celebration, it seemed to make everyone more determined to enjoy themselves. People kept commenting on how much more relaxed and joyful the atmosphere was compared to other weddings they'd attended. The formal stuffiness that Rachel had insisted on was replaced by genuine warmth and connection. Around 9 p.m., just as the party was reaching its peak, my phone buzzed with a text message that made my blood run cold. It was from Rachel, and the timestamp showed it had been sent from the airport. "Jake, I know you must hate me right now, but I hope someday you'll understand that I did this because I love you too much to trap you in a marriage where my heart belongs to someone else. I hope you can find happiness with someone who can give you what I couldn't. Sophia, I'm sorry for putting her in this position. She's a good sister, and she'll help you through this. I'll be in touch about dividing our things once I get settled. Thank you for 3 beautiful years." The message was quintessentially Rachel, self-serving and dramatic, focused on making herself feel better about her betrayal rather than taking genuine responsibility for the pain she'd caused. She still had no idea that her abandonment had been the catalyst for something infinitely better than what she'd destroyed. I showed the message to Sophia, who read it with a mixture of sadness and disgust. "She still thinks she's the victim in all this," Sophia said quietly. "Even now, she's convinced herself that she did you a favor by leaving." "Let her think whatever she needs to think," I replied, deleting the message. "We know the truth, and that's all that matters." The real test of our decision came later that evening when the photographer presented us with the first batch of images from the day. Looking at the pictures, I was struck by the contrast between Sophia's radiant joy and the tense, artificial smile Rachel had worn in all our engagement photos. Sophia's happiness was genuine and infectious, lighting up every frame in a way that made it impossible to imagine the day ending any other way. But the most telling moment came when we cut the wedding cake. Rachel had insisted on an elaborate 5-tier creation that was more about impressing the guests than celebrating the couple. Sophia had suggested we simply repurpose it for our ceremony. But when we approached the cake table, we discovered that Rachel had ordered it to be personalized with her initials intertwined with mine. The elegant R&J monogram looked ridiculous now, a reminder of the relationship that had been based more on appearances than substance. Without hesitation, Sophia grabbed a knife and carefully scraped away the R, leaving just the J visible. Then she dipped her finger in the frosting and drew an S next to it, creating a simple but heartfelt S and J that represented something real and lasting. The guests who witnessed this spontaneous moment burst into applause, and several people later told me it was the most romantic thing they'd ever seen. As the evening wound down, Tom pulled me aside for a private conversation. "I have to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me," he said. "Did you know Rachel was going to leave? Because the way you handled everything today, the way you had contingency plans and backup solutions for every situation, it doesn't seem like you were caught off guard at all." I looked at my best friend, the man who had stood by me through years of friendship and who deserved nothing less than complete honesty. I suspected she was having an affair, and I was pretty sure she was going to find a way to get out of marrying me. But Tom, even if I knew what was coming, does that change anything about what happened today? Does it make what Sophia and I did any less real? Tom studied my face for a long moment, then broke into a grin. "Are you kidding? It makes it more impressive. You turned what could have been the worst day of your life into the best day of your life. And more importantly, you found someone who actually deserves you. Rachel never appreciated what she had, but Sophia does. Anyone with eyes can see that." The last dance of the evening was To At Last by Etta James, a song that felt perfect for the journey Sophia and I had taken to find each other. As we swayed together in the dim lighting of the reception hall, surrounded by the remnants of a celebration that had exceeded everyone's expectations, I felt a peace I'd never experienced during my 3 years with Rachel. "Mrs. Thompson?" I whispered in Sophia's ear, testing out the sound of her new name. "I love hearing you say that," she replied, pulling back to look at me with eyes full of love and promise. "Though I have to admit, I'm still getting used to the idea that this is real." "It's real," I assured her, spinning her slowly around the dance floor. "And tomorrow, we start building something that will last forever." As the last guest departed and the staff began cleaning up the reception hall, Sophia and I stood together in the doorway, looking back at the space where our new life had begun. The wedding that was supposed to celebrate my union with Rachel had instead become the foundation for something infinitely more meaningful with Sophia, and somewhere in the distance, Rachel was probably telling Brandon Cole about the narrow escape she'd made from a life that would have been wrong for her, never knowing that her escape had freed me to find something right. 6 months later, Sophia and I were living in the house I'd bought for Rachel, but it felt completely different now. Sophia had transformed the sterile, magazine-perfect interior into a warm, welcoming home filled with laughter and genuine comfort. Her students' artwork covered the refrigerator. Weekend mornings were spent reading the newspaper together in bed rather than rushing around trying to maintain some impossible standard of perfection. The honeymoon phase might have been accelerated by the dramatic circumstances of our wedding, but the deeper compatibility between us proved to be absolutely real. Sophia supported my dreams of expanding Thompson Auto Repair into a classic car restoration business, and I encouraged her plans to eventually open her own tutoring center. We worked together as partners in a way I'd never experienced with Rachel, who had always seen my ambitions as obstacles to her own social climbing. The news of our marriage had spread through Riverside like wildfire, and the story had taken on a life of its own. People loved the romantic narrative of true love triumphing over betrayal, and Sophia was treated like a local celebrity wherever she went. Her students adored hearing about their teacher's fairy tale wedding, and the parents at school events would approach me with knowing smiles and comments about how lucky I was to have found such a wonderful woman. Rachel, meanwhile, had discovered that life with Brandon Cole wasn't quite the paradise she'd imagined. Through mutual friends and social media, we heard fragments of her new reality. Brandon's wealth came with expectations and demands that Rachel hadn't anticipated. He expected her to be available for his business dinners and social events, often. With little notice, her real estate career had essentially ended when she moved to San Francisco to be with him, and she was struggling to establish herself in a much more competitive market. The exotic trips and expensive gifts that had seemed so appealing during their affair had strings attached. Brandon treated her more like an accessory than a partner. And the Instagram photos that showed their glamorous lifestyle couldn't hide the tension in Rachel's smile. She'd traded a stable, loving relationship for excitement and luxury only, to discover that those things couldn't replace genuine connection and mutual respect. The most telling moment came when Rachel reached out to Sophia directly, about 4 months after our wedding. She called on a Tuesday evening, and I could hear the conversation from the kitchen where I was making dinner. Rachel's voice was strained and vulnerable in a way I'd never heard before. "Sophia, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me," Rachel said. "Are you happy? Really, truly happy with Jake?" Sophia's response was immediate and firm. "I'm happier than I've ever been in my life, Rachel. Jake is everything I could have asked for in a husband, and more. I made a terrible mistake, didn't I?" Rachel's voice was barely above a whisper. "I threw away something real for something that looked shiny but turned out to be fake." "I can't answer that for you, Rachel," Sophia replied gently. "But I can tell you that Jake and I are building something beautiful together. I'm grateful every day that fate brought us together." The conversation ended shortly after that, but it confirmed what I'd suspected all along. Rachel's grand gesture of abandoning our wedding for a more exciting life had backfired spectacularly. She'd gained wealth and status, but lost the stability and genuine affection she'd taken for granted. Meanwhile, Sophia and I had found something precious in the wreckage of her betrayal. The final chapter of our story came almost exactly 1 year after our wedding day. Sophia and I were celebrating our first anniversary at the same restaurant where we'd first discussed our impossible plan. We were laughing about how nervous we'd both been, how certain we were that something would go wrong when Sophia's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Rachel, and the message was longer than any communication we'd received from her since the wedding day. She wrote about how her relationship with Brandon had ended badly, how she'd moved back to Los Angeles to start over, and how she'd spent months thinking about the choices she'd made. She apologized for the pain she'd caused and acknowledged that abandoning our wedding had been the biggest mistake of her life. But the most important part of her message was the recognition that Sophia and I had found something real together. She admitted that watching us build a life based on genuine love and mutual support had made her realize what she'd thrown away. She ended by saying that she was happy for us, and that she hoped we'd have the kind of lasting happiness she'd been too selfish to appreciate when she had the chance. Sophia showed me the message, and we read it together in silence. There was no satisfaction in Rachel's misery, no sense of victory in her regrets. Instead, there was just a quiet acknowledgement that life had unfolded exactly as it was meant to. Rachel's betrayal had freed me to find my true partner, and Sophia's courage had allowed us to seize a moment that could have been lost forever. As we walked home that evening, hand in hand under the same stars that had witnessed our unconventional wedding, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed. A year ago, I'd been engaged to a woman who saw me as a stepping stone to something better. Now I was married to a woman who saw me as her destination, her choice, her partner in building something meaningful. The best revenge, I realized, wasn't making Rachel suffer for her betrayal. The best revenge was living so well without her that her absence became a gift rather than a loss. Sophia and I had taken the worst day of my life and transformed it into the beginning of our greatest adventure together. And somewhere in Los Angeles, Rachel was probably still trying to figure out how the sister she'd always dismissed as ordinary had ended up with the extraordinary life she'd thrown away. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.